Another wake-up call for humanity. Here is British celebrity Russell Brand sounding the alarm in response to our latest threat, Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Don't you feel that an issue of this scale and complexity, comparable in a way to the pandemic except for the immediacy and gore of its consequences, demands of us personal reflection and an acknowledgement that the changes we require as a society, as a planet, are so radical that when it comes to crisis, we're ill-equipped to deal with it. We don't have the principles, the values anymore to turn to. We can't turn to a set of principles and values and say, oh no, something terrible is happening. Who are we? What is it that we do when we're confronted with this again? We can't turn to a collective grandmother or grandfather and say, what did you do when it was the Nazis? Because it's not the Nazis anymore. But what it makes me recognize is that we are ill-equipped spiritually and psychologically for the times we find ourselves living in. That this is an invitation for us as individuals and a society to awaken and to address what we want from each other and what we want from the world. What our shared and collective priorities are, what our individual priorities are. Because once there is war between Ukraine and Russia, it's too late.
Russell Brand's call for radical systemic change is echoed across the globe, and his conclusion that the problem is one of values, morality, and spirituality is bang on. The last decade has revealed many of humanity's strengths, weaknesses, and threats, and the need for change is obvious to most. The normal factors associated with the resistance to change will apply. However, the next generation is clearly much more aware of the consequences of staying on the same path. It's time that we look at the opportunities that change offers us. In this video, we will look at comments on the Ukraine war taken from different perspectives, all reaching to the same conclusion on the root cause of the problem and the keys to the solution. Here is a clip from Black News Tonight, a media outlet from the United States.
I want to talk about the international community's response to the Ukrainian situation. As soon as Russia invaded Ukraine and the war broke out, everybody around the world was almost unanimous in its support for the Ukrainian people. Everybody stood up and spoke out about how this was wrong, and they talked about the humanitarian cost, and they talked about sympathy. They sent their prayers. They did all the things you do when bad things happen to people who don't deserve it. I ain't mad at that. That is cool. Here's my issue. The very same week that the Ukrainian people were harmed by Russia, Israel is bombing Syria. Saudi Arabia is bombing Yemen. Bombings are happening all around the world, and it seems like the only people who got sympathy were the Ukrainian people. The only people who got international love and prayers and declarations and statements made were the European folk, the white folk. Not the brown folk. Damn sure not the black folk. Why? Oh, those Arabs been fighting forever, so when you see a bombing or some kind of internal war, you don't trip about it when it happens in the Middle East, but somehow it's not supposed to happen here. And this ain't my theory. CBS News had somebody report that. They said, well, this is happening in basically a European country, and they're civilized. He used the word civilized. Another reporter talked about it being people with blonde hair and blue eyes, and how that's what makes this a problem. People keep talking about this as if it shouldn't happen here. You're right, it shouldn't happen here, but it shouldn't happen anywhere. But the fact that the global community is only outraged when it happens to Ukraine, they get mad when Crimea gets annexed, they get mad when people from Kosovo and Kosovars get kidnapped back in the day, but they don't say anything about Nigerian girls getting kidnapped. They don't say anything about Lebanese people being bombed. They don't say anything about Afghanistan and Iraq. They don't say anything about Palestine. They don't say anything about Yemen. They don't say anything about Kenya. They don't say anything about Somaliland. They don't say anything about any of these countries. We can't wait for the media to tell us when to be outraged. We can't wait for the international community of powerful elites and powerful bodies of money. I'm talking about the United States. I'm talking about France. I'm talking about Germany. I'm talking about the World Bank. I'm talking about all these companies and institutions that tell us when to care and how to care. We can't wait for them. We got to have our own compass, our own values, and our own principles.
Although this report is primarily focused on the issue of racism and bigotry in the context of war and how lives are valued. He comes to the very same conclusion as Russell Brand. The main problem and solution lies within the issue of values, morals, and principles. This is the biggest problem that humanity has to overcome if we are to resolve our global challenges and save the planet. If we retain this mindset of hate and tribalism and the constant need to exploit and oppress anyone outside our tribal group, there will never be a successful human experiment. We need to elevate our consciousness from one of tribalism to one of globalism. This clip of an exchange between Regina Valdez, Climate Reality Program Director, and Dr. Peter Carter points directly to the primary solution.
The war economy, the destructive economy that we live under prevails. We have designed this economy by default in order to protect ourselves, which means in order to make war. We live under a war-based economy, and we see evidence of it all around the world. We're seeing rather dramatic evidence of it now, of course, in Eastern Europe. So my question would be, and particularly at this time, is there an economics of peace? Well, indeed there is. If you Google, you'll find journals, papers published on economics of peace. It's a real thing. Although, unfortunately, if the old question, if somebody asks you, well, what do you want in the world most? And you say, well, peace, well, they'll laugh at you. Because we've lived through generations and generations of most horrible warfare. And so it seems to be impossible to create a world of peace, but that is absolutely untrue. We've got societies and cultures of peace going way, way, way back. But what we do have to do is we have to learn about it. Like everything else, in order to create a peaceful world, we have to understand how to do it. And we're not doing this at all, really.
Thank you so much, Peter. I like so much what you had to share, and we have this emphasis. You're so right. I mean, if we look at some of the top war colleges in the United States, they easily come to mind. West Point, Annapolis. We spend so much money shoring up these academies. But you're so right. Where are our peace colleges? Where are they? We need that.
The recommendation of a peace college may sound far-fetched to some, but it is exactly what we need. We do not groom leaders to be environmentally or socially conscious. We historically glorify war and violence and create systems that reward ruthless behavior, unethical and immoral practices in pursuit of profit. And we are experiencing the results of that leadership model today. We can definitely change our course, but we have scientific evidence that our window of opportunity is closing, so we need a new leadership paradigm now. And that begins with re-education on how to do the right thing. The subject of spiritual intelligence should be integrated into every educational system and be an integral part of all leadership and executive training programs. We have two choices. We can remain in denial and stay on this path towards self-destruction, or we can change our thinking and contribute toward the building of a beautiful future. Thanks for listening.